The curse of the void skin, the armor sat untouched for over 1,000 cycles, hidden deep beneath the surface of a forgotten world in the Varnak Confederation's most secure vault. To call it a relic would be a failure of imagination. It was a thing of dread, cloaked in silence and in myth. No one forged it in recent memory. No one claimed to understand its origin. All that remained was the legend, a suit of armor so ancient, so powerful, and so temperamental that it had defied every living being who dared approach it. They called it the Void Skin, and they spoke of it in hushed, fearful tones. It wasn't just dangerous, it was alive, or at least it acted like it. Dozens of species, from warrior clans to techno-mystics, had attempted to bond with the armor, unsucceeded. Some didn't even survive the touch. It rejected them with malice, snapping bones, boiling flesh, melting minds. Entire research divisions were lost in seconds. Some thought it cursed, others believed it was sentient and simply didn't like to be disturbed. But most believed the same thing, that the Void Skin wasn't created to be worn. It was created to choose. There were whispers of its origin, that it was built by a dead civilization so advanced their machines blurred the line between matter and will, that it had once been the heart of a weapon so catastrophic even its creators were consumed, and that it wasn't just an artifact, it was a prison. Whatever the truth, the one constant was this: the armor waited, never sleeping, never yielding. It was sealed in a chamber of reinforced quantum alloys, guarded by tradition, fear, and encrypted law. And still it pulsed subtly like something dreaming. The Varnak elders declared it unfit for use, too volatile, too dangerous, even too conscious. No record remained of the last one who tried it on. Just the stain on the chamber wall, permanently fused into the metal. The Confederation had decided long ago that some relics should remain untouched, best left to time and myth. But myth has a way of turning its head when it smells blood. Then came the humans. They were newcomers arriving late to the galactic order. Primitive, unstable, barely unified. They lacked elegance. They had no psychic link to the stars, no memory of the old empires, but they were different. What others feared they studied, what others buried they unearthed. The galaxy noticed too late that humans didn't follow rules, they rewrote them. Their rise wasn't slow and considered, it was chaotic and fast. They bled more than any species, and they survived anyway. To most, they were dangerous. To the armor, they were interesting. It didn't happen during a grand ceremony. There was no prophecy or ritual. The Void Skin didn't awaken to trumpets or sacrifice. It stirred in silence, its black plates humming like a forgotten beast, not for a king, not for a group, but for her, a former scavenger named Reyna Mororo. Just another soul adrift in a galaxy that never noticed her existence. But the armor noticed. And that's when the waiting ended. Because the Void Skin wasn't just armor. It was memory, vengeance, and something more, something alive. It had waited through 1,000 years of silence for a match. And when Reyna stepped into its chamber, dusty and uninvited, it finally breathed. The last one to dare touch it, they weren't supposed to be there. Reyna's unit had been chasing scattered pirate signals across the Derek system when the readings spiked energy signatures so old they didn't match anything in the galactic archives. It was supposed to be a routine patrol. Instead, it became a detour into myth. Deep beneath the crust of an uninhabited moon tucked behind layers of radiation shielding and derelict tech. They found it, the vault. Hidden, locked, forgotten. Until now, the chamber door resisted every tool they had. Plasma torches hissed. Sonic disruptors screamed. Nothing worked. Then without reason or command, the door opened. No sound, no fanfare, just silence peeling away to reveal the impossible. Inside, the room was massive and circular, the walls covered in alien runes that pulsed softly. And at the center, standing upright like a statue, was the armor. Black metal traced with red veins that shimmered like slow-burning fire. It didn't look like technology. It looked like something grown. Like it had formed around a memory and decided never to let go. No one said a word. Then Reyna stepped forward. "What is this place?" she whispered, her voice swallowed by the echo. "Classified," the Varnak tech stammered beside her. His skin shimmered, a fear reflex specific to his species. "You shouldn't be here. You're not allowed." She didn't hear him. Not really. The armor had caught her eye and refused to let go. It wasn't awe she felt. It wasn't fear either. It was something stranger, recognition. Like seeing a scar you forgot you had. Something inside her chest twisted, not in pain, but in presence, a pull. Her hand moved without her consent. One step, then another. "Stop!" the tech shouted. "Don't touch it." But she did. The moment her fingers brushed the plating, the world fractured. A shockwave slammed through the room, hurling bodies backward like paper in a storm. Lights exploded, alarms shrieked, the floor cracked, everything screamed except her. Reyna stood still, boots planted, unmoved. The armor woke, plates lifted off the stand piece by piece, hovering like metal petals. Then slowly they turned toward her. Not like weapons, but like limbs remembering their place. One by one they slid over her body. Smooth, perfect, the armor wrapped around her, not like a suit, but like a second skin. No screaming, no blood, no rejection, just silence, and then a heartbeat. It came from the armor itself, a red pulse from the chest, glowing like something alive. Symbols etched in its plating flared to life. Light filled the room, red and ancient. Somewhere far away, machines began to stir. Old machines, deadly ones. Listening for a signal they'd waited eons to hear. Reyna fell to her knees as the armor fused completely. Her breath was shaky, her skin slick with sweat, but she was alive. More than alive, different. "Captain, are you okay?" A voice crackled in her ear. She blinked, but her own voice replied first, "I think something's coming." It wasn't her words that made her team freeze. It was how she said them, palm layered, like two voices overlapping in the same throat. The armor didn't just accept her, it bonded with her, sunk into her bones. And as it did, it opened doors in her mind she didn't know existed. She could feel everything, heat signatures in the walls, power readings in her squad's weapons, data streams from the floor's energy, grid. Symbols danced across her HUD in a language she didn't know but understood. Ancient fluid living. "You said no one could wear it," she said quietly, turning to the Varnak tech. "They can't," he muttered, stumbling backward. "Hundreds have tried. They died, that thing. Kills everything it touches." Guess no one told it that, she answered flatly. Her squad remained frozen in the corridor. Weapons lowered, eyes wide. Even Sergeant Kell, who had survived a decade of war in the Outer Rims, looked shaken. Kepi asked cautiously, "You still in there?" "I think so," she said. But she wasn't sure. Something had changed, something fundamental. Because the armor didn't just want her body. It wanted her war. War awakens. The silence after the armor's fusion didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the moment before a scream. Reyna knelt on the fractured vault floor, breathing hard, hands trembling inside gauntlets that felt more like muscle than metal. The void. Skin clung to her like it had known her forever. It didn't weigh her down. It held her up. But it wasn't done. The red glow in the chest pulsed faster, brighter. It wasn't just power. It was a beacon. Somewhere in the galaxy, deep in forgotten space. Machines stirred. Not satellites, not drones, weapons, warships. Long thought lost their black hulls, cracked with age, now flickering to life. The dead were waking, and they were listening. Back on her ship, alarms howled. Thorn the Varnak tech scrambled to a console, panic in every motion. Multiple warp signatures, he shouted. "Old tech, not Varnak, not registered. They're already here." What Kell barked. "They're not responding to hails. They're coming in hot, and they're headed straight for us." Reyna stood, the armor adjusted to her movement, shifting with liquid smoothness. Doors opened before she reached them, systems responding to her without touch. The ship recognized her now. "Get me visuals," she ordered. The screen flickered to life outside. The stars dimmed as dozens of ships blinked into reality, jagged, angular insectoid. They weren't designed, they were grown. War machines shaped like nightmares. And at the center, looming larger than anything in their database, was something else. A carrier, a hive. It moved like a god with purpose. Its engines bled green light like poison. Its hull pulsed like diseased flesh. "Who the hell are they?" Kell muttered. Thorn's voice cracked. "That's pre-divide tech, ancient, forbidden." That can't be real. But it was. Reyna stared, not in fear, but certainty. She wasn't guessing, she knew. "They're not here for the Varnak," she said slowly. "They're here for me." Her helmet's HUD flared, alien symbols lit up. She didn't need a translator. "Welcome back, Wielder. War resumes." Another alarm screamed. The first wave of energy slammed into the cruiser's shields. The ship shook, lights flickering. Panic flooded the control room. But Reyna stood still, unmoved. She felt it, the hum of the armor syncing with the ship's systems. Without lifting a finger, she accessed the defense grid. Schematics flashed in her mind. Shield strengths, weapon arrays, power distribution. It was like the ship whispered secrets into her bloodstream. "Divert power to forward shields," she commanded. Hold position. Prepare to counterfire. Captain Thorne blinked. How do you know our shield modulation protocols? I don't, she said, her eyes locked on the screen. The armor does. Another blast rocked the hull. Sparks flew, consoles exploded. We can't win this up here, Reyna said. We need to land. Draw them away from any inhabited systems. Kel's face twisted. Land with that fleet above us. They don't want the ship, she said flatly. They want me. She turned gaze steady, so I give them what they want. No one argued. 30 minutes later, the cruiser descended into the ash-filled atmosphere of a dead moon. There were no cities, no settlements, just stone silence and shadows. A battlefield. No one would witness. Perfect. The ship hit the ground, hard. Ramp dropped, wind howled. Reyna stepped out first. The armor responded instantly, reinforcing her legs, extending what looked like wings or blades across her back. The ground beneath her boots cracked. The air rippled. Static clung to her skin like a storm about to break. She wasn't wearing the armor anymore. She was the armor. The alien ships followed, but they didn't land. They burrowed claws, splitting Earth hulls, groaning. From their open maws spilled creatures that didn't fit biology or logic. Hybrid war beasts stitched from metal and flesh, twisted by time. Some crawled, others floated, all moved with predatory purpose, and all locked onto her. Kel's voice buzzed in her ear. You're not fighting that alone. Reyna didn't answer. She stepped forward, each movement warborn. You're right, she whispered, and then she raised her arm. Red lines lit across the armor. The ground cracked. From beneath the surface, shapes rose, towering skeletal constructs, forgotten machines of a war long buried. They weren't built. They were waiting. The one-named Warbringer. They came not with fanfare, but with weight pressure in the air. A deepening shadow across the moon's broken surface. Every hybrid creature halted, their glowing eyes fixed on the sky. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The battlefield froze, tension stretching like a bowstring. Something was coming. And then it arrived. The largest of the enemy ships, a grotesque monolith of blackened alloy and bleeding lights, cracked open like an egg. From within descended a figure, massive, silent, terrible. He did not ride a vessel. He was the vessel. Armor flowed over him in molten waves, constantly shifting, never settling. He floated downward with no engines, no flames, only gravity, surrendering to presence. When his feet touched the ground, the crust splintered beneath him. Stones burst outward. Cracks radiated like impact craters. He stood still, towering at least 3 feet above Reyna. His body gleamed with black and crimson, pulsing in tandem with something ancient and alive. A jagged crown fused into his helm. 6 burning eyes blinked in unison, each one glowing with the dying light of a different star. Her constructs stepped back. The hybrids hissed in unison. Even the wind flinched. Then he spoke not with sound, but with force. Pressure slammed into her mind like a tidal wave of thought. Words etched themselves into her skull. Wielder, you were not meant to rise. Reyna didn't flinch. The armor surged in response, red light flooding her veins. She stepped forward slowly, deliberately. And yet she replied, her voice layered, distorted, here I am. You wear our legacy like a thief. She narrowed her eyes. No, I was chosen, and I think that pisses you off. The being tilted his head. His form shifted slightly. Edges warping like heat. Hayes, you were chosen by a mistake. That armor was not meant for your kind. You bleed, you rot, you die too easily. She smiled without warmth. I also fight. Her constructs moved beside her, forming ranks as if sensing her intent. Their blade arms extended their stance, locking into formation. And unlike you, she said coldly, I don't need 1,000 years of sleep to remember how. The Warbringer lifted one hand. The air vibrated. Across the battlefield, every hybrid monster began to twitch, then charge. Hundreds of them surged forward in a wave of claws and teeth. Form ranks. Reyna roared, her voice carrying not just through air, but through minds. Her constructs obeyed instantly, slamming their shields together with a grinding screech. They became a wall, unyielding. Behind them, Kel and the squad scrambled, taking defensive positions around the drop site. They didn't ask questions. They followed her lead because she wasn't a captain anymore. She was something else. The first beast hit the line with thunder. Steel clashed with bone. Screams and sparks filled the air. Reyna launched herself forward. The armor propelled her like a missile. She met the first hybrid midair, her arm transforming into a blade. One strike clean, the creature split in two. And now another lunge from behind, her shoulder flared, morphing into a cannon. One blast and it was vapor. She didn't think, she didn't guess. The armor thought for her, adapted, shifted, became whatever she needed, claws, spears, shields. It responded to threat faster than nerves. Every kill made her faster, every move sharper. The Warbringer watched unmoving. He wasn't fighting, he was studying her, measuring, and she realized this wasn't the real battle. This was the audition. But he didn't know something. She wasn't just fighting him, she was remembering. The armor didn't just give her strength, it gave her memory. Not hers, but others. Wielders, long-dead soldiers who had failed. Voices filled her skull between every strike. Warnings, commands, regrets. Visions of burning stars and crumbling towers. A woman standing atop a broken world, shouting a name that wasn't Reyna's, but echoed with eerie familiarity. The armor had been worn before, each wielder a step closer to the end. And she wasn't the first, she was the last. A hybrid beast struck from her blind spot faster than the rest. Her elbow exploded with a spike, impaling the monster through the throat. She turned, breathing hard, chest heaving. A memory struck unbidden sharp, a battlefield of shattered moons. Ships screaming in space, a figure in the same armor. A final stand, she gasped. The Warbringer lifted both arms. From the sky, green fire rained down, not at her. At her constructs, they screamed as light devoured them. Whole columns vanished, limbs scattered. The line cracked. Kel's voice shouted in her comms cap, "We can't hold. We're getting shredded." She turned her team, pinned behind wreckage, surrounded. They were human, mortal, terrified. And she remembered something else, a voice deep and final. "You were made to carry the war. You are not the first. You are the last." She dropped to one knee, pain surging up her spine. Now she understood. The armor hadn't chosen her by mistake. It had been waiting for someone with nothing left to lose. Memories that weren't hers. The battlefield burned. Plasma scorched the ash-covered earth and smoke danced like ghosts through the air. Yet through the chaos, Reyna moved like a shadow, precise, untouchable. Her armor guided her as much as she guided it. Every step, every strike, every kill flowed from muscle memory that wasn't entirely her own. She wasn't fighting. She was performing a ritual, one that had been written in blood long before she was born. Her HUD flickered symbols, scrolling too fast for her eyes to catch, but her mind absorbed them anyway. Strategies, formations, weak points in enemy armor. Her perception stretched, time bent, and all the while something in the back of her skull whispered, not in words but in memories. They came in flashes, sudden, violent. A woman with eyes like burning stars stood on a fractured world, arms lifted as thousands died around her. A man with silver veins screamed defiance into a black hole before vanishing inside it. A creature not human with wings of smoke sang a war chant as a swarm of hybrid beasts overwhelmed it. These weren't dreams, they weren't visions. They were lives, and they were hers now. The armor was more than a weapon. It was a vault, one that carried the echoes of every wielder who came before, and it had opened fully. Their emotions slammed into her like waves, pride, despair, agony, failure. Most had died screaming. Some had died silent. None had succeeded. Reyna stumbled, nearly falling, as one memory struck with the force of a missile. A black tower, a fractured sky, millions screaming into the void. She stood at the center of it all, but it wasn't her body. It wasn't her voice. And yet it was. "No," she gasped, gripping her head. The past didn't listen. Another flash of battlefield, floating in orbit, stars bleeding light. The armor burned red hot, and the voice in her skull whispered, "This war was never won. It was sealed." That was the truth. That was the secret the armor had hidden from every fool who'd ever tried to wear it. It hadn't rejected them because they were weak. It rejected them because they weren't enough, because they would have opened what should have stayed buried. And now Reyna had. The Warbringer raised his hand again. This time he wasn't testing. He was cleansing. A wave of hybrids surged forward. Dozens, hundreds. The constructs that hadn't been vaporized locked into place again. Battered but loyal. Kel's voice buzzed in her ear. "We're surrounded, Cap. We can't hold another wave." She looked up, eyes burning. Another memory struck, the last wielder. The one who gave the armor its final command. "Wait. Watch, choose the one who won't give up." That's what the armor had done. It had waited, watched her from the shadows of fate, chosen not the strongest, not the smartest, but the one willing to burn to stop what came next. She wasn't the first, but she was the last, and this time the war wasn't going to be sealed. It was going to end. The truth beneath the nightmare. The Warbringer didn't fall when Reyna struck him. He reeled, staggered under the weight of her blows, but his body twisted. Monument of armor, and will remained upright. Sparks sputtered from cracked plates, one arm. Twitched, glitched his weapon, warped and flickering, but it wasn't pain in his posture. It was resistance, something deeper, something ancient. Reyna advanced, the void skin burning hotter with each step. She was panting, armor steaming, muscles trembling beneath the plates. Her last strike had drained her, and yet the fire inside kept pushing forward. It wasn't adrenaline, it was purpose. Behind her, the battlefield screamed, plasma bolts, dying roars, broken machines. Her squad was still alive, barely. Her constructs held what lines remained, but it was crumbling. Too many enemies. Too much chaos. Still she walked. The Warbringer looked up, 6 eyes burning with something colder than hate. She raised her arms again, preparing to strike. But then the ground beneath her moved. Not cracked. Moved. It breathed. She froze as a deep groan echoed beneath the crust. Stone shifted, ash swirled. Then the Warbringer's body shuddered. He wasn't resisting anymore. He was surrendering. His chest opened, not from damage but by choice. From within, a black mist poured upward, thick, heavy, intelligent. It didn't behave like gas. It writhed like thought tendrils reaching to the sky before spiraling downward into the moon's core. The Warbringer's body twitched, then slumped. Empty. Reyna stepped back. "What the hell?" she whispered. The mist vanished below. Then came the voice. "You opened the gate, little wielder." It wasn't the Warbringer. It was something older. Older than him. Older than the armor. Older than memory. Reyna's breath caught. He wasn't the threat. He was the lock, and she had broken it. The ground exploded. A black spire tore through the earth, towering higher than a cruiser, howling like a living creature. It wasn't made of metal or stone. It pulsed, twisted. It was alive, a creature pretending to be architecture. The Warbringer's body was yanked into it, absorbed like fuel. Every hybrid beast across the battlefield froze, then collapsed. Not dead, not powered down. Released. They were never meant to win. They were the distraction. More spires rose in the distance, hurried by 1020. All across the horizon, the moon screamed as its crust ruptured. And from the depths, something stirred. Not a beast, not a fleet, a presence, a force. Thorn's voice cracked through comms, panicked and shaking. "This isn't an invasion, it's a resurrection." Reyna couldn't speak. Her mouth was dry, her lungs locked. The armor wasn't built for war. It was built to stop it. Her knees buckled as the realization carved through her. This wasn't just a battlefield. It was a prison. The armor wasn't a weapon, it was a seal. A shackle, and she had shattered it. The sky split. A rift tore open above the moon, bending reality at the seams. Through it, something began to emerge. A shape that defied comprehension. It had no true form. It shifted with every second. Eyes without bodies, limbs without logic. It wasn't a creature. It was entropy, unleashed. Her armor trembled. Not from fear, from rage. It remembered this thing. It had fought it before and lost. That's why it had waited so long. Why it had killed so many. It wasn't searching for power. It was searching for sacrifice. She should have known the armor never chose warriors. It chose survivors. Those broken enough to carry its burden, stubborn enough to try again. It had chosen her because she would do what no one else could. Die for the right reason. The earth cracked. One of the rising spires tilted, erupting in a blaze of magma and debris. She caught herself just before falling. Armor adjusting to cool her burning skin. Behind her, the last of the constructs collapsed. Whatever energy had powered them was spent. Her squad stood at the crater's edge, wide-eyed, stunned. This wasn't a war anymore. It was an ending, and she had lit the match. Not a victory, but a sacrifice. The rift above stretched wider veins of unreality, spidering through the sky like cracks in glass. The thing on the other side didn't cross over. It pressed against existence, testing, pushing, tearing. Its presence was a storm with no center. Its scream, a silence so complete, it suffocated every sound around it. This wasn't a monster. It was a truth the universe had tried to forget. Reyna stood at the edge of the crater, breath, ragged shoulders hunched beneath armor that now felt heavier than galaxies. Her legs ached, her bones trembled. The fire inside her dimmed, not from weakness, from cost. Every second the rift widened, the burden grew, and it was hers alone. Behind her, Kel and the others staggered forward. "We're not leaving you," he said, his voice hard despite the quake in his chest. "You can't stop that thing alone." She turned to him, eyes glowing beneath the visor, and spoke softer than anyone expected. "I'm not stopping it," she said. "I'm sealing it, just like the last wielder did." His face drained, but they died. "I know." Her voice didn't crack. It had already broken. He stared at her, fist clenched, jaw locked, then nodded once. "You better make it count." "I always do." She smiled, but it was a tired thing. A whisper of defiance wrapped in farewell. As her squad retreated toward the cruiser, Reyna stepped forward. The ground beneath her feet shivered, air thickened, vision blurred not from exhaustion, from reality twisting. The closer she got to the rift, the more everything unraveled. Time lost sequence, light lost meaning. And then the armor spoke, not in voice. Wishrim. In memory, they came like stars, falling dozens, hundreds of faces, some human, many, not wielders, survivors, sacrifices the past poured into her, moments of death, of triumph, of refusal to surrender. They had all fallen. Every last one, except one, the one who had given the armor its final command. Wait, watch, choose the one who won't give up. And it had waited, watched her rise, watched her bleed, watched her step forward when others turned back. The rift pulsed. The thing inside saw her. It recognized the armor, and it screamed, not with sound, with presence. A roar made of hatred so ancient it left frost on her skin. Her knees wavered, her vision dimmed, but she didn't stop. She raised her hand. The armor responded. Red light surged across her body, converging at her chest. From it emerged a core, a sphere pulsing with everything she had left. It rose into the air, trembling with unbearable heat. "Initiate final protocol," the armor asked. For the first time, it sought permission. She nodded. The core tore free. Blood dripped from her nose. Her lungs seized, but she stayed upright. The rift began to close, dragged inward like a wound trying to scar. The creature lunged, but it was too late. Reyna, barely conscious, whispered her final command. Close the door. And the light swallowed everything. The final goodbye, splints ruled the aftermath. Where once the rift had torn through the heavens, now only a scar remained closed but still bleeding. Memory, the sky above the shattered moon was whole again, stars shimmering faintly through a haze of falling ash. But beneath that sky, the battlefield was ruined. The spires were gone. The hybrids lay broken, motionless. No more charging, no more hissing, just quiet. In the center of the devastation where the final blast had struck, lay the armor, once a god's shell, now nothing more than scorched metal. Its plating was cracked, glowing veins extinguished, surface burned black by the force of its last act. The chest plate, still warm, pulsed faintly, then faded. Reyna was nowhere to be seen. No body, no blood, no bones. She had vanished with the light. And still, the silence spoke volumes. Hours passed, then days. When the cruiser finally returned to the moon, the squad moved carefully, walking among the scorched earth like pilgrims crossing sacred ground. None spoke, none could. There were no words for what had happened here, only awe, only weight. Kel led the way, boots crunching over broken stone. His armor was scorched, torn in places. His eyes looked older. He reached the center, stared at the crater where Reyna had made her final stand. There, resting on a jagged slab of stone, lay the single piece of her armor, the chest plate untouched, waiting. He knelt beside it. "She wasn't supposed to win," he said softly, voice hoarse. Thorn stood behind him, arms crossed, silent. His gaze was distant. Finally, he answered, "She didn't win." Kel turned to him. "Then what do you call this?" Thorn exhaled through his nose. "She chose to lose better than anyone else ever could." The others gathered around, forming a rough circle. None of them removed their helmets. Not out of fear, out of respect. They had all felt the moment it ended. They'd felt the war die. Kel stood again, lifted the chest plate in both hands. It was lighter than it should have been. Hollow, but it still radiated heat. Heat like memory, like presence. "She gave everything," he whispered. They didn't bury it. They didn't take it with them. Instead, they placed the chest plate atop a stone in the center of the crater, like an altar. Around it, they laid what was left of their fallen constructs: scattered armor, broken blades, cracked shields, not as trophies, as witness, as truth. No plaque, no names, no glory. Just silence, and a warning: the armor would not awaken again. Not for kings, not for conquerors, not for the brave or the bold. It had chosen once, and that was enough. As the team returned to the cruiser, the wind began to rise again, carrying ash into the sky. The crater behind them remained untouched, sacred in a way no one could explain. There was no monument here, no story to etch into marble. Only a truth written in blood and sacrifice that someone once had stood against, something no one else could, and said no more. They left the moon behind, but none of them ever forgot the sound of the door closing. Her final miracle. The sky raged above. The rift screamed with light and distortion folding in on itself as Reyna's final command ignited. But before the core detonated, before the world split, something else happened, something no one expected. A pulse, not of destruction, but of life. It radiated outward from the armor's core, a deep red wave that washed across the battlefield like a breath held for centuries finally released. It moved through ash and stone, across broken constructs and battered soldiers, and where it passed, it changed things. The first to feel it were her squad. Pinned behind fractured ridges, wounded, breathless, they had braced for death. Then came the warmth. Not heat, not pain, something older, something soothing. Their armor shimmered just for a moment, then began to change. Metal rennet sensors realigned, wounds closed. It wasn't full transformation, not like Reyna, but it was enough to fight, enough to live. Thorn gasped as light licked across his suit's chest. She's spreading it, he whispered. And she was. The void skin had always been singular, a one-host system, a relic too dangerous to duplicate. But Reyna had never cared for rules. She didn't hold the power. She became it, and in that final moment when the galaxy tilted on the edge of oblivion, she gave something no other wielder ever had. A miracle. One by one, her squad rose from the ground. Not just stabilized, enhanced reflexes, sharpened, vision cleared. They moved like warriors touched by something divine. They weren't invincible, but they were ready. Kel stared at his own hands as his HUD glowed red, synced briefly with the last traces of her interface. His voice cracked barely more than a whisper. She gave it to us. He looked toward the crater. She wasn't gone yet, not fully. Inside the armor, Reyna still stood barely. Her legs shook. Blood dripped from her nose, her mouth. Her hands trembled from where the core had torn itself free. But her eyes burned, her lips parted in a breathless whisper. Just a little longer. The creature behind the rift screamed again, slamming against the veil as the core rose higher. But Reyna stood firm. Not for herself, for them. Her miracle wasn't power, it was time. She gave them the moment they needed to escape, to survive, to remember. The armor, sensing the urgency, did something it had never done. It amplified her. All systems surged, red light flooded from her chest. Fractured plates sealed themselves temporarily, stabilizing her long enough for the final act. 1,000 memories rushed through her, every wielder, every stand, every failure. But beneath it all, one constant. They fought alone. She would not. "I'm not your past," she whispered to the thing clawing through dimensions. "I'm your reckoning." And then she moved. It wasn't fast. It wasn't elegant, but it was final. She walked toward the rift, each step burning her from the inside out. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just kept walking. The creature recoiled, not in fear, but in recognition. It knew her now, not as prey, as the door it could never get through. As the light finally peaked, her squad watched from the dropship. They didn't cry either. They stood silent, because they knew what this was. Reyna Maroro had given them everything. Not just a second chance, but the strength to make it matter. Then the core detonated and light erased the sky. The silent armor and the last legacy. Light gave way to silence. Not the fragile hush of peace, but the weighty quiet that follows something truly final. The battlefield was gone. The spires obliterated. The rift sealed in on itself like a wound closed by fire. Whatever had clawed at reality from the other side was gone, dragged back into the prison. Reyna had reforged with her body and soul, and when the dust settled, only ruins remained. The surface of the moon was scarred beyond recognition. Blackened rock, deep chasms, pools of molten earth, where once machines had stood in formation. No beasts, no constructs, no enemy vessels remained. Even the air was still, as if the atmosphere itself dared not breathe until it was sure. In the center of that devastation sat a crater, wide, deep, and deathly quiet. At its heart, where it lay the armor, what remained of it anyway, the void skin, no longer pulsed with light. Its plates were cracked, pieces missing. The chest piece, once alive with energy, was dim. No red glow, no hum. It wasn't sleeping. It was finished. The squad arrived 2 days later. Their ship hovered above the ruin for hours before descending. No one wanted to speak. Not yet. They walked in silence across the remains of what had almost been the galaxy's grave, boots crunched through layers of cooling ash and melted alloy. The sky above was calm, broken only by the faint shimmer of distant stars. They found the crater easily, and at the center, the chest plate still warm. Kel stepped forward first. He crouched, picked it up gently. The edges were jagged, burned. His reflection stared back at him in the dulled black metal surrounded by cracks that spidered like veins. The glow had faded, but something lingered. Something quiet, not power, not pain. Presence. She did it, he said at last. Thorn stood behind him, arms folded, brow furrowed. We shouldn't be here. Why not, Kel asked. Because this place isn't a battlefield anymore, Thorn said. It's a tomb. They didn't speak again for a while. Instead, they stood in a circle around the armor, the same way they had stood around Reyna during briefings, during battles, during the last stand. They didn't know was coming. And though she was gone, her voice echoed in their memory. Her commands, her fury, her courage, her silence. They didn't bury the armor. They didn't take it back. They placed it on a large stone in the center of the crater. No markings, no technology, no beacon, just the armor and the crater it had created. A scar not on the moon, but on history. She wasn't supposed to be the one, Thorn muttered. Kel didn't look away. She was the only one. And it was true. The Void Skin had waded through eons, rejected thousands, burned through champions and gods. It didn't want strength. It didn't want strategy. It wanted someone who would finish what others started, not survive the war. End it. And now it was silent. Forever. They left the moon in silence. No signal, no broadcast, just memory. The armor never stirred again. But stories did. In the quiet places of the galaxy, hushed voices spoke of a woman who wore a cursed weapon and disappeared into the light. Some called her a savior, others a fool. But none could deny what followed the quiet. The long, strange silence that fell across the stars like the breath held after a final scream. They say no one ever wore the armor again, not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't dare, because war for the first time in 1,000 years stayed dead, and because someone once stood in its way and whispered, not this time.